I just didn't. If you would have asked me before this all went down, I didn't think it was going to happen. We had the annexation of Crimea, and I don't remember the date, but what was it, like 2014, 2015, that
Yes.
Russia annexed Crimea, and it's not a region of the world that I'm super in tune with. I know a lot of it's past history, but not so much the modern. Then there was the Euro, the man, what was it? The Euro-Maidan? Was it the Euro-Maidan? Yeah, I remember that was a protest where they ousted the other president. So I remember that, and I think that, and we'll get to, was that backed by the U.S.? Was that caused by the U.S. Later down the line? But I think a good place to go from here is, how does something like this happen? I mean, in your opinion, your expert opinion, how does something like this happen, and how much of this is, on the United States? We have a history of a pretty shitty foreign policy. I feel like we've missed the mark a lot. So I'm curious to know, how much did we play a role in this happening, or what were the warning signs that we potentially missed? I'm sure you're going to bring up the Minsk agreement, but I just kind of want to get your perspective on that.
So this is exactly a question which I'm researching now for a book which I'm writing or finishing now about the origins of this conflict and different aspects of this conflicts in Ukraine which took place, starting with Maidan Massacre, the annexation of Crimea by Russia, the war in Donbass, or civil war in Donbass, and Russian military interventions in Donbass since 2014, and the current war between Russia and Ukraine, which is culmination of these different conflicts which started in 2014 with the Maidan, and in particular with the Maidan Massacre. So this is a book manuscript which I already received invitation to submit my proposal from the U.S. academic press. So I hope to finish this soon, and I'm going to be presenting this on this very topic at the American Political Science Association annual meeting in Montreal in Canada, actually, in September. So this is based on my research. And I can say this is like a most important issue. So I do not yet have all the evidence to say it, because this is still part of research, and not all the evidence is available. But the conflict, again, which is currently going on in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, goes back to the Maidan and to the violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government by the means of the Maidan massacre of the police and Maidan protesters. And this massacre was crucial. The start of this conflict. It became a turning point in Ukrainian politics, but also this massacre led to violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government, which was relatively pro-Russian in terms of orientation, and this led to a response by Russia, which when Russia escalated this conflict and annexed Crimea region in southern Ukraine, which was part of Ukraine, but was populated by ethnic Russians. And afterwards, it started also to support separatists, pro-Russian separatists in Donbass. And finally, it drastically escalated this conflict by invading Ukraine in 2022. And in my interviews, media interviews, and in my publications, including in the United States, popular publications, I predicted that this can happen, that the war between Russia and Ukraine can happen. There was a very strong possibility or real possibility of this war. So I tried to prevent this, basically just because I researched this. So I saw this basically becoming a very dangerous situation, and it was possible to avoid this war and to prevent it. But unfortunately, this did not happen. And so now I think important to understand how this happened. And that's why I'm researching this issue, in particular, role of different political actors, different countries in this conflict. And I'm looking into the role of the United States as well, and in different conflicts, including the war between Russia and Ukraine, but also in because this has also became a proxy war between the Western, and in particular the United States and Russia in Ukraine, but also I'm looking into the Maidan massacre, who was responsible for this, and how this massacre led to the violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government, and what this actually was from a political science perspective, and evidence. Was this a revolution? Was it a coup? Was this a regime change led by the United States? So based on my current research and current evidence, I can say there are different elements of all this taking place. So there were the elements of far-right-led revolution in Maidan. During Maidan, there are also evidence of oligarchic coup during Maidan in 2014, but also there is certain evidence of the United States-led regime change. So it's not yet clear which one was most important, but because a lot of evidence is not yet public, in particular, a lot of documents from the US government, which can shed a role on the US, any kind of involvement in this, are still not publicly available. So I think this is very important to know what actually happened and who actually was responsible for these events. But I think there is evidence of the United States involvement in this Maidan led violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government, because the US government supported this publicly, and there are also other evidence. There is no evidence of direct involvement of the US in the Maidan massacre, but there was a testimony or interview by two leaders of far-right political party called Svoboda. And they gave interview to Ukrainian journalists in their book. This Ukrainian journalist said that these two leaders of far-right party, which was originally a neo-Nazi party, they said that they met, along with other Maidan leaders, they met with representative of the West. And they did not name any country, specific country, but it was very likely the United States, because this representative was speaking on behalf of all Western countries. So this only one country can do this, and they basically discussed how Western governments can change their policy towards recognition of the existing then government of Viktor Yanukovych, and they basically discussed how many people need to be killed for the West to stop recognizing the Yanukovych government. And Maidan leaders mentioned like 5 people killed, 20. They said not enough. Western representative told this was not enough. If there would be 100 people killed then on Maidan, then the US and other governments, basically the Western governments, would change the recognition of the Yanukovych government and would support Maidan opposition. And this is exactly what happened. After Maidan massacre on February 20th, there was close to 100 Maidan protesters killed during this very violent event, and immediately on this, after this massacre took place, like within hours, there was a name for these protesters who were killed. They were called Heavenly Hundred, and so this became a very kind of widely kind of mentioned name of protesters, Heavenly Hundred, who were killed. Even so, they were not exactly 100, but very close to 100, and many of them, or some of them, were not even killed during the Maidan, but they were included as a part of these victims in order to create like Heavenly Hundred. And immediately after the Maidan massacre, without any investigation, the U.S. government and other Western governments stopped recognizing Yanukovych government, and they supported opposition. They recognized new government of the Maidan, which was led by the Maidan opposition, including far-right parties, including from Svoboda. So this is just one evidence of the U.S. involvement or Western government involvement in this regime change. And even then President Obama, when he gave interview after the Maidan took place, he said that U.S. administration, his administration, was involved in arranging a transition of power in Ukraine during the Maidan. So he also said that there was U.S. involvement, but he did not specify what kind of involvement was. But I think this is very important to say that this was not only a Ukrainian kind of led event, but there was United States involvement. And after the Maidan massacre, after the new government came to power as a result of Maidan massacre, Ukraine became what I call a U.S. client state, because U.S. government became very strongly involved in Ukrainian politics and policy and key decisions by Ukrainian government, like not to resist Russia, to annex Crimea. This was done by basically because the U.S. government U.S. government officials told Ukrainian government officials what to do and what not to do. And in specifically about Minsk agreements, this was U.S. government officials who said to Zelensky and to Poroshenko that these agreements should not be implemented. And they basically, Ukrainian government followed this again, because Ukraine became very dependent on the United States, And U.S. Government, in particular, then Vice President Biden, who was before he was elected president of U.S., he was vice president of the United States under Obama administration, and he was responsible for relations with Ukraine. And so he was very active in 2014 in all these events, and specifically after new government was formed, he became involved in deciding or supporting who would become prime minister of Ukraine, who should be dismissed, and who would be nominated. So this kind of another illustration that U.S. Plays very strong influence in the Ukrainian politics after the Maidan, and the same concerns as the same applies to current war between Russia and Ukraine.
Wow, I understood it at I thought a little deeper level than most people, but you went very granular there, and that was a lot of information. And thank you for sharing. But those some, I wouldn't call them accusations, right? Like that you have the documents that you've read, but that is wild. And just so the folks that aren't as familiar, the Maidan Massacre is essentially where the protesters were protesting in the Maidan Square, correct? Am I correct with that? And there were snipers that just started shooting people. And I don't think they ever caught any of the snipers, correct? Like that, no one was ever found out. They don't know where they came from, and it was super fishy. And you were saying that you'd found a document that said how many people need to die at this protest in order for the West to back us. Just like really quick catch up, make sure everyone's following along. Is that a pretty good assumption of a very shortened version of what you were saying?
Yes, there were like interviews by two leaders of Maidan in the Ukrainian book, which is published in Ukrainian, and I cited this in my studies. In addition to this, I did research about Maidan Massacre, who was responsible, who actually committed this mass murder, and this is again published in peer-reviewed journals, presented in U.S. conferences, academic conferences, published in books. So my research is academic one, but I found a lot of evidence, which is I think overwhelming. Without any doubt, I can say that this massacre was conducted in front of thousands of people, like witnesses, in front of hundreds of journalists from different countries, including the United States, like CNN footage, like BBC, all this major NBC and CBS. I checked their footage, I searched their footage and videos about Maidan Massacre live film during this massacre. So all this evidence shows that this massacre was not conducted by government snipers or not by the police, which were tied for the massacre, but still there is nobody convicted for this mass murder. But this was conducted by snipers who were located in Maidan control buildings, and specifically they killed and wounded both police and Maidan protesters in order to falsely blame government forces, to falsely blame government snipers in order to delegitimize, basically to say that they were responsible, that this was massacre on orders from the Yanukovych government, and this led to his overthrow because he was removed by the parliament and he was blamed for the massacre. And the West, basically including the United States, stopped to recognize him as the president of Ukraine. And then Biden, in his memoirs, he says that when the massacre happened, just immediately after this, he called Yanukovych and told Yanukovych that he basically needs to leave Ukraine because he needs to leave presidency of Ukraine, and he has to leave Ukraine as well. So this is just kind of without any investigation. This was again immediately blamed on Yanukovych. Even so, all the evidence, which is not only evidence which is publicly available, which I collected, like hundreds of testimonies, more than 500 witness testimonies about snipers, videos of snipers. There is also evidence from Maidan Massacre trial and investigation, which is publicly available. I posted on my YouTube page. There are testimonies of absolute majority of Maidan protesters who were wounded during this massacre, and they testified that they were wounded not by the police who are charged with this massacre or any government snipers. They testified that they were wounded and shot from locations of Maidan controlled buildings in the back and in the side. So this is consistent with forensic medical examinations, with testimonies of dozens of prosecution witnesses, with admissions by 14 members of Maidan sniper groups. In public, they publicly admitted. Some of them were Georgian snipers. they said they received order from Maidan leadership to massacre both police and protesters in order to kind of create chaos and to overthrow Yanukovych's government. This was successfully done, and evidence is just overwhelming. I published this evidence, but the issue is that media never reported this, so it's like people who have no idea, they read like New York Times or Washington Post or BBC, they watch like all the television networks in the US, they just have image that this was done by the Yanukovych government, by the police. Even so, there is nobody basically charged with this, nobody convicted for this massacre, and the trial is still ongoing. But all the evidence shows that that this massacre was not conducted by government snipers, but was conducted by the opposition snipers, including from far-right organizations like Svoboda and the right sector.
So, and I want to be very, very clear with our listeners, you are not pro-Russian at all. You've been on record many, many times saying that this is an illegal invasion. It is a violation of international law, but you are just presenting the evidence as where it points to, right? Like this is just, you're stating facts. Like this wasn't this. There's a lot of shady shit going on, and you're presenting that. But I mean,